Hello, my name is Philip Bither. I'm the curator for performing arts here at the Walker Art Center. And with me is Jenny Scheinman, violinist, singer, composer, band leader, arranger, and many other things. Jenny's here with her band Mischief and Mayhem, which performs tonight in the Walker's McGuire Theater. And Jenny, you've been here several times in the past. We've enjoyed your work with Bill Frisell, both the Unspeakable Project and the Disc Farmer Project. And since we first heard about this band, we've been very intrigued, and everything I've heard on disc is so exciting. But I wondered if you could tell me a little bit about when you first met Nels Cline, Todd Sikafus, Jim Black, and when the band first came together.
Well, I met Nels a long time ago. I met Nels when I was still living in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. We were in a band together led by drummer Scott Amendola, who we both still play with occasionally, but now that I've moved to Brooklyn, a little less frequently. And we toured a lot. We got in a van. That was our first tours, you know, when I was right out of college. We got in a big red van, which we named Valentine.
And this with Mischief and Mayhem?
No, with Scott and Nels.
Oh, I see.
So we spent, and then after a while, Todd joined that band. Oh. So there were the three of us plus, the four of us: Scott Amendola, Nels Cline, and me, and we traveled all over the place. And I guess we stayed in touch mostly through that band. We've done a few duo things, Nels and I. And then Todd I met through that same band way back, you know, so this is going like
12 years?
12 years ago, something like that. Jim, I know really through Mischief and Mayhem. I mean, know well.
Right.
I hadn't played with him that much. Actually, one of the first bands I was in when I moved to New York in 2000 was a Balkan, sort of futuristic Balkan band that Jim was in. And I was just tagging along, trying to keep up with, you know, the rhythms and all these melodies that I wasn't familiar with. But the band has been together for about 4 years. I was asked to do a concert in Brooklyn, Celebrate Brooklyn.
Oh, out in the park.
Which is out in Prospect Park. And it's sort of an unlimited audience, you know. I mean, it spills out into the fields. Right. And it's a band shell, so and they wanted me to do an instrumental show, which many of the bands I'm in that I lead, and also, you know, like my bands with Bill Frisell, I don't think really lend themselves to outdoor, I don't know, they don't project. They're much better in an intimate,
more introspective.
And it's, you know, it feels good when people are in a room and can focus. They're more conversational, I guess. Yeah. And so I thought, you know, about it for a while, trying to figure out what band could really project off the stage. Right. And both Nels and Jim are players that really, you know, they've got a lot of exuberance, a lot of energy, a lot of excitement, a lot of surprise. And the music that I wanted to write for that band was more along the lines, actually, of the bands that I was in, the bands that I led when I lived back in the Bay Area, these sort of rock quartet with the violinist, the singer, and a band that had some mischievous grooves and fun.
Is that
a little out of control?
Did you come up with the name?
You know, that was a phrase we started using, and I sort of jokingly called it Mischief and Mayhem on our first tour before we really thought of it as a band. And then it stuck.
I think the New York Times recently described it as that this is an aggressive bunch. I'm sure you feel you have no trouble holding your own, or it's your band. And does it? It seems from what I've heard on DVD and CD is that it's a full range from really exciting, noisy, high energy to quite quiet, and you know, it kind of is do you decide the tone in the moment, or do you lay out what you'll be playing, you know, far in advance? And for instance, what should we look for tonight?
Well, last night we played for the first time since a week at the Village Vanguard in July, and the day before our Village Vanguard, the 3 days before the Village Vanguard run, I wrote a whole bunch of new music. I really wanted to play all new music.
Specifically for the band?
Specifically for the band. And we played that, and we recorded it, and we're going to release that next year.
Great.
So suddenly the book grew from about 2 sets worth of material to 3. You know, or, I mean, there's way more than enough material now. So last night we were looking at the list and trying to figure out what to choose. You know, now we have quite a lot to choose from. I'm not exactly sure what we'll play tonight, but I think the sort of quieter, introspective things very often in this band, unlike some of my other bands, have a trancey or hypnotic element. Nels definitely uses a lot of loops and drones. Unlike maybe some of the other bands that I lead that have more, it's more like parlor music or chamber music, or, you know, there's this sort of sensitivity and internal focus. This, if it's a drone, it's sort of a cosmic thing, you know. So those sort of moods mixed with these, you know, spunky, punky, surfy, ridiculous things.
Yeah. Are you, is this live recording, will this be the first recording for the band, essentially, for Mischief and Mayhem?
Yeah. We recorded a couple shows a while ago, and maybe that's what I sent you.
Oh, yeah, I think that's right.
But this is a studio recording.
Okay. And when you said you just recently wrote a number of new compositions, is that how you often approach the process of writing? Do you write for individual players? I mean, you know who's in this band, and you wrote a certain kind of composition for them. Does that inform your other composition as well, knowing who the players will be first?
I try to. What comes out sometimes works for lots of different players. Sometimes it's really specific to a band. There are songs, you know, it's not. There are musicians that I play with that really write for specific members of a band, and I basically write songs, whether they have words or not. I mean, and you know, I think of this band as totally different than all my other bands, and I played the roughs from this recording session to a friend, and he said, it sounds just like Jenny Scheinman music. You know, there's some songs in there and some stuff that's a little more out of control. And, but I mean, when, like the 3 days before we played at the Village Vanguard, I was really thinking about Nels and Jim, and I was looking for a few different types of moods that I knew they could offer. I wanted like a playground that we could play in.
Do you build in a fair amount of free space for improvisation into these compositions as well? Yeah.
Sometimes it's designated to a player. Like there'll be a tune that has like there's a few tunes where my part is very specific, and like there's a tune it doesn't have a name yet, but it's sort of like a windstorm or something, and Nels and Jim and Todd just create this kind of you know, picture of things whirling around, and then I sort of slice through it with a melody that stays the same. You know, and I do that 3 times.
You know, this band kind of epitomizes something that I think you're really well known for, which is an artist very difficult to label easily. And I think it seems that it's part of the zeitgeist of the age we live in music, where labels are becoming much less meaningful. Artists are really transgressing. But I think you, more than many, really exist in so many different styles of music, or people, you know, in reading about your work, people seem to label it based on what their own background is or something. Do you find that it's been a kind of conscious effort, or or how do you feel about a kind of getting away from being labeled, you know, alt country or jazz or blues or folk or, you know, classical or whatever other label people will use? And if you had to use a label, what would it be for Mischief and Mayhem?
Well, I think originally you had in your program that this was a night of jazz. I remember seeing
yes,
that category.
Well, it was part of a jazz series.
I called somebody and said, could you put /rock in there?
Yeah, right.
Because that definitely needs to be in there.
Sure, yeah.
Some of the beats are straight rock. I mean, there's no singer, and there are definitely songs that are more abstract than most rock, but that's in there. I don't know about the whole label thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you said, that people describe this music according to their influences.
Yeah.
It sort of busts a listener on their own frame of reference.
Right, yeah.
And I had never thought about it that way. When I'm sure I'm influenced by the people that I've been writing for, by living in New York.
Right.
And thinking about writing for certain musicians and writing for a certain audience. Traveling a lot really opens that up. To play the same song in front of audiences all over the country and all over Europe, and to go down to Brazil and play these songs. I've been to 2 places that have very little jazz context. I did a long tour in China, and that was really interesting just to see how, it's like seeing somebody that has no context at all for the music respond to beats. When you see children do that. They have no context for what genre the music is, but they sort of move to it, and the sort of interacting with the music is really interesting.
Was that kind of liberating in a certain way, in that people didn't have this deep body of history with a certain form, and therefore approached it in a more open way, or
Definitely,
not?
It was totally enthusiastic, and the idea of clapping between solos or after solos was totally participatory. They were in the band. That was really exciting. That was, But I don't know what you call it. I just write what I hear.
Right.
I'm not a very sophisticated writer. I'm fairly versatile, I guess, as a player. So as a side person, I get hired on all sorts of things.
It's amazing the range of artists that you work with, from very popular, pop and rock people to very experimental folks. And you seem to be able to navigate through so many different styles quite easily. Is it from your background, perhaps, or?
Well, I grew up in my parents are New Yorkers that are sort of back to the lander. They went to a ranching town out in California. And so they had this huge jazz record collection.
Oh.
But I would go down to the bar and listen to like 50s country. I'd listen to old, Hank Williams and stuff like that. And the music, the local music that wasn't coming from my parents, was fiddle music and old-time music, country music. So there was a lot of that in my upbringing. So that sort of influences a lot.
A question I had, because in reading about your upbringing, I wondered, it almost seemed to stand counter to the diverse range of styles and influences that are seen, heard in your music. I read that, for instance, your parents and some other back to the landers just formed their own high school for you, and there was only 6 students in your class or something like that. And one could imagine that you'd be limited in what you'd be exposed to then musically.
I am limited in what I've heard. There's sometimes I think there's huge holes in my, or it's a very different set of influences that I have. In some ways, I'm very influenced by my parents' generation of music, because I wasn't really around record stores and radio for the first 15 years of my life.
Including top 40 and pop music and that kind of thing?
Yeah, we didn't really have that, and there was nothing to buy. There was no store where I grew up. It was very, very, there was a tiny grocery store, and there was a post office, and there were 2 bars, and there was a Grange dance hall.
Wow.
And then 2 hours away there was a town. So it was very isolated.
Did you find, I wondered if in growing up in that environment, if the natural beauty that surrounded you, or also your kind of athletic pursuits. I heard that you did these marathons with horse riding and running, and did those aspects, because it's a fairly, in this day and age, unusual way to grow up. Do those influence, you think, your work as a musician and composer?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably all the, the rhythms of the horse's feet. I rode a horse to school,
Oh, you
till
did?
I was in
Yeah.
high school.
Ah.
And that was, I'd wake up, get myself out of bed, get my clothes on and go saddle up a horse, and then, half awake, ride 4 miles to the school and back. I'm sure that somehow influenced it. I mean, I can't really pinpoint this kind of stuff, but I do like the feeling. I like evoking the feeling of, for example, an open space, a valley, and I really am attracted to it in music that has a sort of environmental
expanse.
Yeah, some sort of like I was talking about this piece with Mischief and Mayhem. That's really. Maybe somebody growing up in an urban environment might think of it as traffic and some sort of environment like that. I'm thinking of it as, like debris flying around in the air, in wind or something like that. I mean, that might enter in.
Was it a culture shock when you went to Oberlin and surrounded by all these kids from different backgrounds and different, all this different new music that was around and things like that, or not so much?
I went to Oberlin right at the beginning of the Gulf War, and that was shocking. And I was really young. I got out of high school a couple years early, only because I was tall and there were only 4 kids, and it didn't seem to matter anyway. And I don't know. I ended up being a bit too young for the world when I entered it, and so Oberlin was definitely a shock. Though I felt comfortable in cities pretty early. As I said, my parents are New Yorkers, so there's an intensity to the city that's familiar and similar to the intensity of living in just in the middle of nowhere. The area I grew up in is right on the western edge of California. It's a triple junction of tectonic plates. There's tons of landslides, earthquakes, roaring surf. It's sort of intense, I guess. It's not a particularly easy climate. It rains. It's one of the rainiest places in the States, so there's floods all winter. Anyway, between that and New York feel more similar than kind of Oberlin is not a suburb, but it's sort of a small town. That was sort of unfamiliar with all these mostly East Coast kids that had come through prep schools. Totally interesting people. I have a lot of friends that were at Oberlin, but it was just such a different story than mine. I wasn't sure what to make of it when I first got there.
Do you find that today now, you're involved with so many interesting musicians in lots of different configurations. You work as a composer of your own work. You've done a lot of arranging for people, and as well as a band member and a band leader. Are there any of those 4 and a singer? Are those 5 kind of roles in the world of music that you prefer more than others, or does that combination feed something for you?
I envy people that just do one thing. I really do. And I can't manage to do that. They do all seem like, they feed off each other. When I branched out a couple years ago and made a record as a singer, I mean, I really went off the deep end. That suddenly became a lot of, I think mostly because it's so confusing to the audience.
Right.
My audience grew tremendously. But I would always get somebody coming to a jazz show just totally confused at what I was doing. Where is the story? Where are the words? When are you going to sing? And definitely I would get people
to an instrumental show that you're doing.
Right. To an instrumental show, and they'd come to a show that I was doing as a singer. Which and the singing material is.
It's a beautiful record. It feels very authentic, and like it seems to have a great sense of certainty and confidence in it.
Thank you. It's actually more true to my early childhood in some ways than everything else. It was right there waiting for me, all that stuff. But there are people that have been fans of my instrumental records that come to singing shows, and either, I don't know, what are their, she's selling out, she's no longer experimenting. People get very attached to what they think you should be doing and who you are.
Yeah.
And audiences even more than friends, you know? They just, they come to hear something, and I haven't made 1 million records, but I've made 6. It seems like I should be, can branch out a little bit. I have 2 records that I'm working on right now.
I was going to ask, because the last 2 records you put out simultaneously, really, Crossing the Field and the one named Jenny Scheinman, which included the vocal work, those you released simultaneously, and that was obviously a conscious choice?
It wasn't conscious at the beginning.
Oh, really?
I
Okay.
was just working on them simultaneously, and then it seemed like a fun,
Because it really showed 2 sides of your worlds.
Yeah. Well, these ones might end up being released together. I'm working on them. I'm working on 2, an instrumental record with Mischief and Mayhem that is already recorded and almost mixed. And then I have a whole set of original songs that I'm going to record, and I haven't started recording them. I have
vocal songs?
songs with lyrics.
Yeah.
But they're all
Your own
stories
music?
of, they're all original. Whereas the first eponymous Jenny Scheinman record was that had some sort of core covers that I either grew up with or were really important to me. So there's only about half of that was original.
Right.
So this will be an all originals record.
Do you feel, when you said it's a little complicated, do you feel pressure then ever to sort of go in one or the other direction, or are you I'm hoping you're able to maintain a life in both worlds.
Yeah. Well, if this sheds any light on it, if I'm nervous before a gig and I have a little time in the dressing room, which usually I do, and we sit around and do drugs or twiddle our thumbs or check our email or whatever you do to kind of...
In the green room.
In the green room, yeah. Very often, say if I'm doing an instrumental gig, I'll sit backstage and I'll sing songs. And the reverse is true. If I'm doing a singing gig, I'll sit back there and I'll play Charlie Parker heads. And it's sort of it's a kind of, it's release and contrast, these two things. And they're also probably coming together a little bit more. I made a record last year with Canadian singer Bruce Cockburn.
Sure.
And I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of touring with him.
Yeah, in fact, I think you'll be coming here through town.
Oh, I am?
Yeah, my friend who runs the Cedar Cultural Center said you'll be that Bruce Cockburn's going to play there, and
good.
you'll be with him.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And he's a musician that, he has a lot of these sort of colors of jazz and sophisticated harmonies and within the context of music with lyrics. And he really wanted me to add that to his music. And there's a few other influences. I really love Sam Amidon's music. Have you ever heard it?
Yeah, yeah.
Sort of old-time music with a very open and sincere love of modern classical music and arrangements that are just beautiful. And I'm not sure.
We're having them in our season next year.
Oh, good.
With a whole group with Nico and Dovman and Thomas. The
it'll
802
be
tour. So, yeah. I
He's
really
really
like his
amazing.
work too. Yeah.
But I have with these new songs, it could be a very stripped down, old-timey or country-sounding record, or I could integrate some more, I don't know, colorful string parts or arrangements in the same way that he does, or I did. Like I wrote a bunch of string arrangements for Lucinda Williams's record, which really, there's some very dissonant lines in there that somehow worked with her music, and I might sort of bring these two sides together a little more.
Yeah.
I have to let it happen naturally. I don't know if it'll be on these records or not.
Are those are records you're going to put out in the next 6 months or so? Or?
Probably not 6 months.
Yeah.
It seems to take a little longer than that, but next year, for sure.
Fantastic. I was interested in two people that I first became aware of your music and your work with Bill Frisell coming here, and another artist who's been important in recent years to us here, Jason Moran, and they seem to be two figures that you've had now various connections with, and I wondered if you wanted to comment on either what you're working with both of them in very different ways have brought to your music, and how you first met for someone like Jason and started working together. And things.
I first heard Jason at a club. We were actually both special guests in a big sort of extravaganza in New York, and I'd never heard him, and it was this like big room. It was sort of a jam band scene, and big room packed with sweaty 25-year-old guitar player guys, and the E minor jam had been going on a long time, and it was really great. And Jason got up on stage and just like blew cool fog over everyone with these big, like 20-fingered chords. I don't know how he did it. It was so surprising, and I nearly had a heart attack. I couldn't believe how beautiful it was. And then I started going to, it's wonderful to live in New York and be able to go see these people that move you so much,
Yeah.
So I went to see him with Don Byron. Once again, it was just incredible. He has such a big, expansive, just beautiful, original approach. And then I made an introduction. I think I just wrote him kind of a fan letter, something like that, and he really liked my records. And so I said, well, I'm going to write a bunch of music for you. We can record it. And
really?
He was into it.
Oh, that's great.
So we did usually before I record, I like to try the music in various contexts, and I did a whole run at a club in New York with Jason Moran and Paul Motion. Sort of just to open it all up and see what could happen.
Yeah.
And then I played with him and Don Byron and a bigger group with Larry Grenadier and Bill Frisell, and then a couple horn players. And anyway, we just sort of got to know each other musically in different instrumentations, like different dinner parties, I guess, see what kind of conversations would come up.
Right.
And I just grew to love him more and more. Amazing. And then we did a record together, really, which was written for him, most of that music.
Right.
And him, on some of the songs, this is a record called Crossing the Field.
Yeah.
On some of those tunes, he has a whole orchestra behind him.
Yeah, it's
so
really
it's like
interesting to
giving
hear
him
when
the
I heard that
evening
record.
gown.
Yeah, and did you arrange all the orchestral music for that record as well? Yeah.
Yeah, that was really fun. And then recently I played with him duo. I sort of went back to just the two of us, and that was maybe more thrilling than any of them. It was really great, fun. But in terms of an influence, he's just listening to him. Playing duo with him, I played a week with him at the Village Vanguard, and I just got to stand right in that curve of the piano, and just like lean my head under the hood of it, and just listen to his hands on the piano, and the kind of development and imagination he has with a pretty simple melody.
Yeah,
He can play very romantically and very dissonantly.
Yeah.
And he's very respectful of, and I don't find him to be a particularly ironic player.
Right.
And that's something probably, I don't think maybe people that are born in the country have quite as deep a sense of irony as people from the city.
And
maybe
he grew up in Texas.
He grew up in Texas. Yeah. Or I don't know, maybe I'm thinking probably of the difference between my siblings and I and my parents who grew up in New York City.
Right.
But he really can sincerely draw the beauty and playfulness out of something and play a stride piano groove and commit to it. Like we did a Duke Ellington tune on that album, and he just
Awful Sad.
Awful Sad,
yeah,
one of the greatest
nice
titles ever.
Yeah.
And he just gave it. He just worshipped Duke on that version.
And Bill's work, it's been over, it's 10 or 15 years you've done some projects with him and things like that. And I know he played on your 12 Songs record as well. And that was the times we've had a chance to have you here with us. It's we're really looking forward to just having you here, with your music, with Mischief and Mayhem tonight. But was Bill's? Did he first hear you when you were in San Francisco? Did Lee Townsend, the producer?
Lee Townsend hooked us up.
Okay.
We met on a session for a singer, an Indian singer, Shweta Javeri. Beautiful, beautiful singer. And we both got very, very sick. I take that back. That wasn't a Shweta Javeri record. That was a Gabriela Moron. That was an Argentinian singer. 2 different records. But Bill and I and the rest of the band caught some terrible flu that, we were like 104, 105.
In the studio.
Yeah, and we all got it. And so I actually don't have a clear memory of him from that. We were like lying on the floor in a puddle of sweat,
that was your
with
first
one earphone
time
on. That was the
together.
first time working together. And it turned out to be a beautiful record. And then we just, it clicked.
Right.
It clicked, and we've played together for years. He's a lover of the bowed strings. He's one of my favorite groups of his is the string quartet. It's cello, viola, violin, and Bill. As sort of the fourth or the second violin, or the other string player.
Is Evan?
Avon, Avon is in that, and Hank Roberts, who he's played with for years. And I think Bill's interest in the old time and early American roots music sort of overlapped with my beginnings.
The history,
Actually, the first time the first real long run I had with him was at the Village Vanguard, and I remember he sent me the book of songs that we were going to play, and the first on the top was "Cluck Old Hen," and I thought, what? This is I saw my dad at age 30 sitting around the campfire with an out-of-tune guitar, and me scratching away on "Cluck Old Hen." I mean, I learned that tune probably when I was 7. So there's some sort of full circle thing with Bill, where we click.
Yeah. The your instrument of the violin. I know when you were young you studied piano and violin, but people the general public thinks of it either in a folk bluegrass country tradition, a fiddle tradition, or in a classical realm, and in your work in experimental music and jazz and other forms. In some ways it's a more of an outlier in some way. Have you always loved the instrument that you play, and have you ever imagined, playing? I know you play a little bit of piano on some of the recordings and things like that. Do you like that this instrument kind of brings something new to some of the styles of music that you work in?
I like that question. I like the idea that you'd ask me whether I like my instrument. Because I don't know if I feel like I ever had a choice in the matter.
Right.
Right now, I would like to take 6 months off and learn how to play banjo and guitar and get back into piano. I'm learning mandolin, really branch out.
Right.
One of the really tyrannical things about the violin is that you have to play it to play it. You can't just pick it up after 6 months and, it's
Do you need to play every day? And,
I mean, you don't, maybe not every day, but yes, you do have to play every day.
Yeah.
To feel the ease and the pleasure, the sensual pleasure of the violin is athletic.
Right.
It's a weird thing that you hold it with your chin.
Right.
It's just totally weird instrument.
And it's fairly unforgiving in terms of...
It's unforgiving, yeah, it is.
As a father of a Suzuki student after 8 years, and the teacher said, now if he isn't ready to do the 3 hours a day, then maybe he should look to another instrument, and he wasn't. And, but it seems like one of those tough instruments that you really...
It is, it's a tough one. But it's, it chose me when I was so little. I mean, my parents, I don't know if I had any choice in the matter. In the very beginning, I just played piano and violin. And actually, I played piano a lot better I didn't play violin very well and didn't practice very much, but I played during the summer. I played just for fun. You know, I played fiddle music and went to big fiddle festivals, and it was something, we lived outside in the summer, like we camped out, and my dad plays guitar and sings folk music, and I couldn't have a piano, of course. Maybe I would have gotten better at improvising on piano if I had been in more situations like that, but I played a lot of just sort of playing along with people, so it sort of fit into the non-extracurricular Jenny really early on. And I also didn't have so much of a, I don't know, when people say you're good at something as a kid, it can be a real handicap. You know, on piano I gave solo concerts and I, you know, won a concerto competition, these sort of things that define, where the world defines you, and I think I resisted that a bit. And it also made me unwilling to go through the slow and hard steps of relearning an approach to it, because I took some jazz piano classes and it was just hard to, you know, I'd find myself trying to, you know, I'd be given Body and Soul or something and I'd go home and I'd immediately write something. I mean, not write it down, but I just had a very specific approach to the keyboard. And I wanted to use all I wanted to use everything right away. It was hard to, it felt like starting over. Whereas violin, I don't know, was always by hook or by crook. And then I just ended up in a band playing it. So it was a bit random that I ended up with violin. But now I'm really interested in it. I mean, it's such a fascinating, it's the ultimate gypsy instrument. You know, it's in so many different types of music. And it's really just that it's relatively loud acoustically, and you can put it on your back. You know, it's small. And so it's just, there's just so many, you can play with almost anybody.
And at the same time, you're interested in learning these other instruments, or what brings you to want to play the guitar and banjo and things like that, just to have other...
I just think we should. It's almost, I think, you know, by 7th grade, everybody should know how to play guitar and sing songs. And also, I always told myself that I'd learn guitar so that I could sing the music that my dad sang to me, to my kid. And I have a 1-year-old now, and I got to do it. You know, there's hundreds of songs sort of at my disposal in that realm that I do sing and pluck along on violin, but it's not quite the same.
Has being a new mom brought, what has it brought to your work as a musician and composer and things like that? Just exhaustion? Or?
No, I've actually thought about something else for the first time in my life, which has been good. And when I do think about music, it's very clear what I want to do is clear. I mean, luckily I'm at a place where, I mean, I've been only doing things I really want to do for a while now, whereas 10 years ago I enjoyed it all. I've always enjoyed playing, almost, you know, whether I'm playing at a bar mitzvah or a restaurant or whatever. There's always something challenging about it. But if given the choice between doing performance and being with my little guy, it has to be a good one. And so it sort of, you know, gets my priorities straight a bit. You know, it's interesting. It's like, you know, it's like the way anything totally fascinating integrates into music. I don't really know. I don't really know how it's influencing things.
And being on the road has been okay.
Yeah, I've been taking him.
Good.
I've been taking him. It's been great. I mean, the road, the challenges of the road are the doldrums of during the days when nothing's happening, when you're just sitting in an airport. When you're sitting in a hotel, when you're tired but you can't sleep because you're in transit or waiting in a dressing room, and you know, if he's there, I'm always doing something. It's great. It's really fun. It's great.
One last question for you is just because mistakenly or not, you're framed in a jazz series here, and that you're often talked about as a jazz artist and things. Do you feel that there's a weight of that history of what informs that music that you carry around with you, or do you feel like you stand outside of that tradition that allows you the freedom to do whatever style of music you want? I mean, what do you think of of the history of that style of jazz music, for lack of a better term, in relation to your own work?
Well, I'm a jazz player. I love jazz. I love the whole history. I love the diversity in it. I love the idea of improvising. I love the idea of meeting, playing with somebody you don't know at all and having a conversation about, say in a monk tune, 4 notes,
right.
or, just saying, hey, let's talk about this. I don't know you at all, and we can play for a whole tour,
right.
for a whole night, and do something with it. And it's so, it's been around now for a while.
Yeah.
The dance music element of jazz, the popular song, the experimental part, it's just very open. It's sort of the conversational side of American music, I guess. But when what does the general public hear when they see the word jazz? I guess at this point it has to be defined a little bit more,
right.
because they hear whatever they hear when the jazz radio station is played, which I am played occasionally on the radio, but it's not always a safe bet that they might not think it's very different than what it's going to be.
Right.
And, the influences in this band in particular are not necessarily jazz, the strongest influences.
Right.
I was part of a big jazz festival in New York last winter.
Jazz is a winter's night, right?
No, not that one. It was Winter Jazz Fest.
Oh yes, that Bryce put together in all the clubs, and I saw you, I think, in 3 different bands during that gathering. Yeah.
One of those was duo with Jason.
Oh yeah, right.
Jason Moran, and it was a night of many, many different bands, and at the end of the night, I called Jason and I said, I think we were the jazziest thing that happened. And I never thought I'd be saying that. I have felt like an outsider in jazz because of my instrument, because violin doesn't have a long, deep history in jazz. It has a bit of a history, but not a long, extensive one. And because I have so many other influences, and I have sort of a patchy experience, lots of influence from Bill Frisell and from working with the Hot Club of San Francisco. That was sort of what put me through college.
Your Grappelli years.
Just that stuff and just patching it all together. Yeah. But words just lose, when it's like the music has outgrown the word.
Right.
So we don't have we don't have quite a new word for it. So I just want the audience to be invited in to see what we're doing.
Right.
And with this band, including rock is important. I mean, I wouldn't, my singing stuff is definitely not jazz. That would be very misleading.
Right. Well, I really want to thank you, Jenny, for being here and taking the time to talk. And we so look forward to Mischief and Mayhem tonight.
Right on.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.